Did you know that grief is a kind of medicine? That is actually one of the best medicines for your soul. Now, if this is true, and I do want to unpack a bit why I think it is, it does raise questions of, well, how do we know the difference between a healthy grief versus kind of an unhealthy grief or a false grief? Are there ways that we can get sidetracked where we maybe think we're grieving and we're actually not? So welcome to Ask Sean, where I explore all sorts of questions about being human and invite you, the listener, to become more present to yourself, your relationships, and your life. I'm Sean Slevin, a licensed professional counselor and a licensed marriage and family therapist. And if you have a question for me, I would love to hear it. You can send that to me anonymously at asksean.org. So why can't we just skip over grief, right? Like, why do we need grief? Why might it be a medicine? Why might it be important? Why might it be necessary? You know, we humans have this amazing ability to experience hard things and not necessarily feel everything in the moment and kind of sort of save some of it for later. And a lot of times, you know, for many of us and for many experiences we have, we won't ever go back and finish feeling those things. And there's something kind of useful about that, right? Like it enables us to carry on, you know, like the alternative is, right, that like hard things happen and you're not able to feel all your feelings in the moment and that kills you, right? You know, or like you're not able to continue. And, you know, we as a species wouldn't have lasted very long, right? If that were the case. So there is something helpful in terms of our survival that we have this ability to kind of bottle stuff up or kind of, you know, pack stuff away in the closet or basement or attic of our psyche. But this also can have a cost, right? You know, those experiences, those parts of us that are carrying pain that we haven't dealt with, you know, there's a toll that takes, right? Like it takes energy to keep it contained, you know, and we can start to feel that at times, right? Like there's so much work involved to like not have stuff get activated, not have it get triggered. And also, you know, there's a way in which we don't have full access to ourselves then, right? You know, like there might be parts of us that have abilities and resources, so to speak, that, you know, we're not able to like, you know, sort of be integrated with or benefit from because we haven't gone back there to do that work. You know, I think about, you know, just the way in which like if something is like kind of one of my markers, I guess, for myself and others is if something is showing up repeatedly, it's like, I probably should pay attention to this, right? Because if an old wound, if a sensitive area, if it's getting triggered multiple times, then that tells me that like it wants my attention, right? And also tells me like this is probably going to keep happening and probably going to keep getting louder until I do something about it, right? And just from a pragmatic standpoint, I've learned that it's way more efficient, way more cost effective to turn towards these things intentionally, right? Than to like force these parts of us to like scream at us or blow our life up or whatever, right? But yeah, so that repetition element I think is a good clue. And again, you know, we're being realistic here that like we're not necessarily going to get to process everything in our life, right? Because we've got so many other things to do. We've got to keep living. We've got to eat. We've got to, you know, pay bills, all of that. So, you know, there's a sense in which we have to make choices, you know. But to habitually ignore when stuff is coming up like that, that's not consequence free. I think that's one of the things I want to point out here, right? Like we like to pretend as a culture that there's some kind of way, some kind of path where you just don't ever have to feel pain. You don't ever have to feel grief. And I don't know. I mean, I think if we look at our culture, we can see that that's not working out so well for us as a nation, right? Like we as a culture, even though we have tried so hard to eradicate grief, eradicate pain, eradicate suffering, like we're a freaking mess, like in all sorts of ways, across the political spectrum, across ideologies, across religious beliefs. Like this is a deeply like cultural problem. Now it's not unique to us as Americans. I just think we have our own particular flavor of how we're not doing well at grief and grieving. So, that repetition element, right, is that's one clue that, okay, there's maybe something I need to deal with that keeps asking for attention. A couple of other kind of indicators here. So we want to watch for where is there more energy coming up than actually really makes sense for the present moment. So you think about road rage, right? This is a classic example. Somebody's losing their shit about some stranger on the highway and ready to get into a fist fight, or maybe they are getting into a fist fight on the side of the road, right? It's like, that's about more than just that moment, Like, think about, when we blow up at a friend or at our partner, and then later we want to say, well, that wasn't really me. And that's partly true, like in the sense that what's coming up there is unintegrated aspects of the self, right? Like, now that doesn't give us a pass, right? Like, we're not off the hook because we're responsible for the things we do, even the things we later regret, the things we feel like we didn't mean. But some part of us, some bit of history is evoked in that moment and is like, oh, this reminds me of these other kinds of things. And so all this extra energy comes up, right? The corollary to this, kind of the opposite of this, is shutting down. So maybe you're not somebody who blows up easily. Maybe you shut down really easily. And so something disappointing happens, maybe there's a conflict, whatever, and your system just, sorry, no one's home right now. Please leave a message, or maybe don't leave a message, but I'm not here, right? Like, so, what's the pain in your past that's being evoked that then makes this present thing extra intense for you, right? Now there can be, I know, some other things going on with shutting down too, which I'm not going to get into at the moment to not muddy the waters, but they're most likely, it also is at least some unprocessed pain, some pain that hasn't been metabolized, that hasn't been grieved, hasn't been faced and worked through. And so in both of these, right, we can see, like, those are very, like, if you're blowing up, if you're prone to blowing up or you're prone to shutting down, that really limits your options, in interactions where it would be really helpful to be able to choose other things, right? So this is part of where it's like, it doesn't really work for us to keep ignoring grief, to keep ignoring past pain. Two more examples. These are, in some ways, variations on those first two, but they have some distinct flavors that are worth noting. So one would be, and they're also kind of like on a continuum. So one would be kind of being dismissive or kind of shaming, right? So this is where something comes up in life or interactionally, and we're, rather than just being kind of like, oh, yeah, I don't agree with that, or no, I don't like that, we're like, oh, really? You think that? There's some kind of shamey, judgy, like there's an edge to it, right? And so that's where we want to be suspicious. It's like, why do I need it? Why the edge? Like if I'm totally at peace inside, there's no need for an edge. It's just be like, no, thank you. Or I don't agree. I don't see it that way. Right. Or the opposite of this would be being over accommodating, right? It's like, and that can be for a couple of different reasons. That could be over accommodating because I don't want to upset you. It's like, oh, like, how do I dance around you so that, you won't be upset with me, so that you'll like me, right? Like, how do I orbit, and try to accommodate everything, I'm not thinking at all about me, right? I mean, you can see there how, okay, if I've got, some wounds in my past I haven't dealt with, maybe I experienced somebody's anger in really scary ways, right? And I haven't worked through that, then I'm stuck sort of with that younger part's perspective on things of like, I can't survive that. I can't let that happen again. Especially the more severe it was, right? Like we might have things in our past where it's like it really was kind of life threatening. And so now it's like, oh, I can't remotely let anything get close to that, right? So you can see again how that's very limiting. Another version of this is where we're over accommodating because we don't want anyone to feel hurt, right? Like this is kind of sort of being the good little boy, the good little girl, the nice person, right? Because I can't bear to see that somebody else might have hurt feelings. Now, I don't mean therefore that we want, the goal is to go around hurting people, right? But if I'm that overly invested, right, where it's like I can't tolerate it, like, well, that says something about me and my own history, right? Because here's the wild thing. As a recovering people pleaser, right, as somebody who I used to work very hard to be nice, which isn't necessarily the same thing as being kind, I would say, or just in terms of how I'm using those words. But, trying to please people, not have people feel hurt, not have them be upset. I mean, it was really kind of a mix of both of these things, both these variations. As I faced and worked through more of my own pain, I found that I was more able to risk people feeling hurt. And the goal wasn't for them to feel hurt, but I could tolerate it, right? And I could stay in connection, and I could be like, oh, I'm so sorry you're feeling hurt. But it wasn't like tearing me up. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, and I'm a terrible person, or the world's going to end, or, all of these really intense feelings that I used to have. And instead, I can just be like, oh, they're feeling hurt. And maybe they're feeling hurt because I made a mistake and I've actually hurt them, in which case I want to understand that and actually apologize. But now I actually have the ability to lean into that, right? Before, I was so afraid of their pain and what that would bring up in me that I couldn't even really do very good apologies because it's like it's all this stuff stirred up, right? Now, actually, because I can hold space for like, oh, they might feel hurt, and that's, that's okay because I have felt hurt and I have worked through that. I survived. I more than survived. I'm thriving, actually. And it's because I'm not so afraid of it. Now, if somebody feels hurt, I can get curious, right? Like I can really lean in and be like, oh my goodness, what happened? Then, what's going on there? And they can tell, they can tell me more things of what they're feeling, and we can kind of parse out, is this something to do with me? Is it not? And if it is, if there's some way that I dropped the ball, like I actually have the emotional space to really try to see into that and be like, oh, I can see how I hurt you there. I wasn't even thinking about that, and that was really insensitive of me. Or, yeah, I was kind of caught up in, thinking about something to do with myself, and like, I'm so sorry. I let you down there. And I can really mean it, right? Like I'm not all clogged up with like all of this past pain, right? So that's part of the thing here, right? Is that like there's this with unfinished pain, unfinished grieving we haven't fully done, or maybe haven't even gotten started on. There's kind of a stuckness. There's a cloggedness, right? Like I was just saying, like I sometimes joke it's a little bit like being emotionally constipated, right? It's like there's emotions in there and they need to come out, but they're not moving. And like that gets really uncomfortable, and that can become really detrimental. It can become deadly in a way. So another kind of variation on the analogy is that I think about kind of a stiffness, right? Like I had something happen. It doesn't matter when it was, but not too long ago. Like I tweaked some muscles in my back, and so I couldn't hardly move my head. Like moving my head like this far was like really painful. Like moving it that far was like, and you can still see I'm still prone to getting a little bit of tightness there just because I tend to favor one side over the other. So at any rate, like I had two options there, right? Like I could have just been like, okay, if I followed the advice of our culture of like, okay, well just don't do anything that triggers it. Well, then what that would functionally mean for me is, okay, I can't ever move my neck again. And so it's like, oh, I gotta turn over here. Hello, how's it going? Like, I mean, it's like, talk about like a freaking robot, you know? Like, I mean, and it's still painful, right? Like, it's not like that makes all the pain go away. It's not as painful, but like, that's super limiting, right? So the other option is I could go to physical therapy, which is, of course, what I did. I could have them work on me. I could have them, give me exercises to do. Pardon me. And so in a sense, I could start moving, even though it was painful. So this is kind of the analogy. Grief is the medicine for our psyche in the same way that movement is kind of the medicine for, stiff muscles or tight muscles, right? Like it's grief is this kind of lubrication, right? It helps things move through. The goal is to be able to have a kind of limberness, a kind of fluidity, physically and emotionally, right? Because if I'm too stiff, then I can't hardly do anything. If I'm too flexible, then I'm a jellyfish and I just flop on the floor, right? So we need some tone, right? We need some muscle tone, but we need limberness, right? Like I need to be able to move my head all around, right? Like our body needs to be able to ebb and flow, right? It needs to be flexible like a tree, right? You see a tree in the wind and its ability to, if it's too stiff, then it breaks, right? The trees that last a really long time, like they have that right mixture of like they're really strong, but they're also they can really move with. And so grief is what helps us develop those capacities, right? Because part of this, this stuckness, so it's a stuckness, as I said earlier, right? That it limits us in some of those ways I was illustrating. But also part of why it's limited is that it's a historical part of us, right? Like even if it's historical from 2 weeks ago, right? It doesn't. Not everything has to be from childhood, though many things are. But it's something not entirely in the present. And so that means the degree to which we are getting triggered into that part of us, that aspect of our psyche, that collection of emotions and thoughts and worldview and everything, is the degree to which we are losing access to present resources, right? Resources within ourselves, resources in our present relationships and our present life. And so like the more triggered you are into a part that is further distant time-wise from the present, the greater the disconnect. I mean, I think about like time travel movies, right? Where some character is, from the past ends up in the future, and there's like, whatever, flying cars and stuff and all these things they don't understand, right? And it's overwhelming, but it's like they don't know how to utilize the resources and the benefits of the present. Like they just don't comprehend it, like if you took somebody from like 500 years ago and you handed them a cell phone, they wouldn't begin to even know how to understand it. Like there's so many layers of complexity there, so they wouldn't be able to benefit from that, even if it could save their life in some kind of circumstance, right? Like you'd have to help train them and bring them into the present, like psychologically, for them to start to be able to utilize that. And that's kind of what healthy grieving is. It's like we're going back to parts of us that weren't able to fully feel whatever we experienced, right? I mean, this relates to the video I did on what is trauma, right? I won't go into all of that right here, but maybe I'll put that up on the screen, or certainly at the end. Hold on. So, but yeah, being able to we need to go back and be more present to that pain, to those emotions. So we don't leave that part of us stuck, right? Like we want to help that part feel what it needed to feel. Do that in connection, do that in relationship, so that it can grow and heal and actually come into the present, right? Because otherwise, there's a sense in which those parts will keep coming up, and we will make decisions from their limited perspective, right? So I'm trying to think of some examples. Well, I'm going to use an example from this movie I watched recently. Maybe I'll think of some additional ones too. But so, what was it called? Train Dreams. Beautiful, beautiful, hauntingly beautiful film. Very quiet movie in a lot of ways. This is not like a big action movie, but just, yeah, a work of art. So well done. Kind of reminds me of Tree of Life, if you've seen that. Another beautiful movie. But it's about the. I'm going to give a little bit of spoilers. I'm not going to go super into detail, but about this man and his life and some of the joys and sorrows he experiences. And there's a point where he experiences a great loss, and after a season, he starts to try to reach out for connection again. He starts to kind of trying to live again. And then something happens, and it kind of interrupts that. And the narrator even says something like, something along the lines of like, even though he knew it was probably impossible, he just spent the rest of his life waiting. And I think it's really tragic. I think it's kind of a warning. Like he could have lived more fully, but he let the choices of this pain that he couldn't fully bear to feel limit him. Because if he had been more honest with himself, I would argue, about what had happened, about what was true, he would have entered into more of the sorrow of that. We'll talk about more just how one does that. And it would have freed him up to like actually go on to experience some good things potentially. And so this is the risk for all of us, right? Like we, that we get to the end of our life and realize I've wasted much of my life because I wouldn't face my pain. And so I let myself be limited by the perspective and the blinders, right, of wounded parts of me. And the only way to lift those blinders, the only way to help the perspective to be broader is to actually help those parts heal, so they're not coming up and hijacking us, right? So, as I was saying earlier, healthy grief is this process of becoming more flexible, more limber, in a sense, really, truly strong, right? Like it, we can mistakenly think in our culture that strength is, and men and women both do this. I see this across both. We can think that being strong is not feeling the pain. Like that somehow be, immune to it. But real strength is actually, I can feel all of it and not lose myself. I can feel all of it and not lose hope. I can feel all of it and not despair. I can feel all of it and not be blown apart, right? It's a sense in which we develop the ability to be able to bear that death and come out the other side more alive. Now, this is not easy. I'm not trying to be like, it's, a walk in the park. Like, there's real dying involved. I've lost track on how many times, emotionally, metaphorically, symbolically speaking, that I've died and been resurrected. And every time, at the very edge, even though I've done this a lot now, I'm very practiced. I have a lot more confidence and faith in the process and in God to bring me back. Still, at the edges, it's like a part of me is like, I don't know. This might be the one I don't come back from. Like, this feels so awful. It feels so painful. It feels so unbearable. How can there be any good, any life on the other side of it? How can there be anything left of me? And yet, here I am, living to tell the tale. After sorrow, loss after loss, disappointment after disappointment. And look, this is me trying to be faithful with my losses, my disappointments. You've got to be faithful with yours. Like, we all have different losses and different magnitudes, and I can't claim to know all everyone's experience. I haven't suffered every single detail, right? But I know loss, and I know sorrow, and I know hurt, and I know suffering, right? You know, these underlying shared human experiences. I don't know, you know, we could list a bazillion different like detailed flavors where it's like, yeah, no, I haven't had that. I haven't had that. I haven't had that. I've had this. I've had this. I've had this. But when we boil all those things down, they all share in common, you know, the pain of hurt, you know, the pain of loss, right? Like these all of these core human things that we all share, that we're all partakers in, no matter what our background is, no matter what cards were dealt. We have different, you know, different intensities, different frequencies, you know, all sorts of stuff like that, right? So the invitation and challenge for each of us is, will we be faithful with what we've been given? Will you be faithful with seeking to bring healing to the places in you that have suffered, right? So it's like it's not about the avoidance of pain. Like, avoiding pain isn't what makes somebody strong. Like, if you're a pain avoider, I'm sorry, but you're really weak. I don't say that to be mean, but pain avoiding is not, it's not brave, it's not strong, it's cowardly. And I say that as somebody who has avoided pain in my own places. I've had to make amends with myself and others because of my own cowardice in the places where it's like, oh, I have not been showing up for myself, or I haven't been showing up for others in my abandonment of myself. So yeah, true strength is I can actually face the thing, and I can feel it, and I can come out the other side. So I'm gonna read this just because I'm not gonna be able to remember it all, and it's a little bit meaty. But so healthy grief, then, true grief, is the ability to stay more present, connected to self and others, as we honestly bear witness to and feel more of what we've suffered, so that we can actually move through the painful past and live more fully into the present. Let me read that one more time. So healthy grief, true grieving, is the ability to stay more present, connected to ourself, connected to others, as we honestly bear witness to and feel more of what we've suffered, so that we can actually move through the painful past, not get stuck in it, not live there forever, right? But actually help it move through, help us come into the present, live more fully into the present, right? That's the goal here, right? Sometimes we think that, oh, if I grieve, am I going to get stuck back there? If I grieve, am I just, am I just whining or ruminating or whatever? And look, those are risks, right? Those are kinds of things that aren't actual grief, right? So, but healthy grief, true grief, is going to be a moving through. Now, that can take a long freaking time, right? But it is going to be movement. The irony is, when we avoid our grief, that is when we keep ourselves the most stuck. That is when we keep having the same thing triggered time after time after time, with no change, with no movement at all. Now, sometimes the movement is really, really tiny, right? Sometimes the stuff that we've been entrusted to try to work through is so massive, and there's so much of it, and so it's like we're working like at little grains of sand, right? But still, like, work at what we can work at, right? It's still better to work towards helping it heal, helping movement happen, than to not, right? So I want to talk some about and these have been already embedded in some what I've been saying, but kind of what are some of the markers of true grief, right? Just to kind of, this is going to be delineated then from what I'm going to talk about a little bit later, of what I would call false grief. So things that we sometimes mistake as grief, but isn't actually grief. So there's three key things here. So there's connection, there's honesty, and there's, I would say, fully feeling, is kind of the way I'm putting it right now. I might have a better phrase for that, but feeling our feelings, the feelings that haven't been felt. Pardon me. So what do I mean by connection? I mean feeling connected to a sense of support from ourself and from at least one other person. If you are inexperienced at grieving, you really need to have somebody with you. This is super important. Now, the more practiced we get, the more we can grieve without somebody actually in the room, right? I've done a lot of work at this, and so I can now do grieving where I'm the only person physically in the room, but I feel a sense of connection and support for myself. I feel a sense of connection and support from God. I feel a sense of connection and support from so many humans in my life, right? And so I'm very much not alone. Even if some of the grief is like loneliness, right? Even if that's some of the pain and the feelings I'm entering into, there's a sense of withness, of connectedness. Now, the further back in time we go in my life, this was less and less the case. You know, like I was further back in time, I was definitely really unsure about God and whether he gave a shit about me. Like I was definitely unsure about my fellow humans and whether they cared about me. And really I was unsure about myself, you know, like I didn't treat myself very well. And so, yeah, there was like a real absence of like sufficient connection and good connection there. So connection though, it's such a fundamental thing. Like we have to have, like, there's something about doing this in relationship that makes it more bearable. You know, like grief that is shared, like truly shared, right? I don't know, it makes it less heavy. It's still hard. There's still dying involved. But it's more bearable. So honesty, this is about telling the truth. And that's both in like actually saying the words, right? This is what happened or didn't happen, right? Whether it's like, here's an awful thing that happened, or here's the absence of a good thing that I needed, right? But whatever, you know, it's there's the using the words and the telling the truth in that way. But there's also this hard to describe sort of felt quality where I'm allowing myself to feel the truth of what happened, of what I experienced. I had a really interesting experience of this, I don't know, the past year or two. And I think I've alluded to this before in other videos, where I was feeling drawn to do some additional work with some childhood pain. And it was something I'd done years of work on. But what was really striking about this experience is I entered into a new level of honesty about what had happened to me. And what's fascinating is there were not really any new words. It wasn't like I said something I hadn't said before, but the feeling of it, I don't know how to describe it well. Like I wasn't blocking, I wasn't shielding myself. I wasn't sort of holding back. I was like, this is what really happened. This is how it was. And there was something about that honesty of like, I wasn't shielding my younger self from the truth. It was like, you know, buddy, this is what it was. Part of me wants to start going into all the details, but we won't go there for the sake of time. But I wept in like a new way, in a new depth. It was like a new layer of depth with myself. And it felt cleansing. I felt lighter afterwards. Like it was really intriguing. That was one of the things that made me more aware of this honesty piece of like, this is part of what I need to strive for, right? Is like really, really telling the truth, not mincing the words, not hiding from it. It's like, this is what was, even though I don't like it, even though it's not what I want it to be. But just to let myself then fully have the feelings, right? Like, I don't want to leave anything stuck by that back there, right? It's like, because, you know, eventually we want to kind of be moving on, right? So the goal is like, hey, well, let's fucking do this. Let's really be honest. And then, you know, kind of embedded in what I've already been saying, right, is I'm trying to fully feel the feelings, you know? And so like, there's several things about this, right? Like it's fully feel in the sense that I'm not stifling it. I'm not pushing it down. I'm not blocking it. Fully feel in the sense of, you know, what's the pain, right? Whatever the pain is that was back there, I want to feel that. But it's also fully feeling in that I need to fully feel what's the good of the now, right? Who's with me right now? Who are the people that care about me now? What is the good in my life right now? And so I want to be really careful here, right? Because I'm not saying like, oh, just look at the positive, right? It's like, no, part of how we help the bad stuff heal, right? Help the bad experiences heal is that we bring to them the comfort of the good, right? So the goal is to feel all of it, right? So I want to be able to, as when I'm working with past pain, I want to be able to feel all of whatever wasn't finished back there as I'm connected to how loved I know deep in my bones I am now, right? Because I want to bring that present love retroactively back to this place, this part of me that didn't know love in that way, that maybe felt really alone or was really hurt or, whatever, abused, whatever the awfulness was, right? So that's part of the fully feeling. Is it's not just feeling all of the negative. It's like I want to feel all of the positive alongside all of the negative, right? And granted, we can't, all is a subjective term here, but as much as I can, right? We want to keep expanding our capacities. I mean, this is kind of the task of our life. We're never done with this. So like this is hard stuff, right? Like it's not easy. It is not for the faint of heart. It is doable. It is definitely doable. We need people with us. And as I said, as I've kind of alluded to along the way, if we're actually grieving, if this is good movement, there should be a sense, even a tiny bit, a sense of movement. There should be little bits of relief, little bits of peace. I mean, again, look, there's such a wide spectrum here of like experiences that we can have and intensities. And so, you might be tasked with, in terms of the life you've been given, with like really massive, massive stuff. And so progress might be really, 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 really tiny. And so it might even be hard at times to kind of like to discern, like, is like, I think maybe I feel a little bit lighter, a little bit better. So, I want to acknowledge like this can be tricky. But in terms of the principle, right, like conceptually, that's what we're looking for signs of, right? Is that I'm gradually feeling a little less rigid, a little less stuck, that I'm able to feel a little less scared of the things that used to feel overwhelming, right? Like that the trajectory is towards all of these things. And so over the longer term, right, that's what we're hoping to see and experience, is that over time, it's like, yeah, such and such used to freak me out, and now it doesn't. Such and such used to like set me off, and now it doesn't. Because now I can just have my feelings and I can move through them, and it's fine, right? It's not this huge thing anymore. So those are some of the things that we're kind of tracking for. So let's talk some about false grief, right? Like, and I'm thinking about two kinds of this, and there may be more, but these were the ones that kind of stood out to me as I was kind of thinking through what I want to talk about here. So this first one, it kind of builds on some of what I was just sharing about the past several minutes, and this is where sometimes we're not actually grieving; we're actually just re-traumatizing ourselves. We're really only just reliving the trauma, and so we're actually just becoming more stuck. And this is a really particularly tragic form of false grief, and part of the tragedy too is that, like, we can be mistaken, we can think that that's grieving, that people around us can think that's grieving. Honestly, a counselor or helper, or clergy or whatever, if they don't have enough experience with their own pain, like they may not quite understand what's happening. They may think that's grieving. So it's like, yeah, it's just, that can be a real bummer, right? So, but let's just kind of unpack a little bit, like, how do we tell the difference, So huge thing, right, is connection. Like, that's part of what makes it re-traumatizing, is that the degree to which we are losing connection to ourself and others here in the present, right, is a degree to which we're potentially moving towards just a reliving the trauma as opposed to metabolizing the trauma, right? This connection, I mean, it's everything. It's so fundamental. So, I mean, like when I'm working with a client, for example, and they're going into a really intense place, like I'll check in with them very gently in various ways of like trying to make sure they still can feel me in the room, right? that they can still feel me as a caring presence. They can feel me as a resource, right? And that's, maybe I could do a different video on, some of the particulars of that. That would be more geared towards, like fellow counselors and whatnot, sort of some of the techniques and skills of that. But yeah, like it's such a fundamental thing, because if I'm working with somebody, for example, and I start to pick up on like, oh, they're having a hard time actually staying in the room and feeling me and feeling supported by me, then it's like we need to shift gears and we need to actually stabilize their nervous system, bring them out of that trauma, because they're not actually metabolizing it, right? It's not actually fruitful work. And so then there's various things that I do, with them. And there's somatic interventions are fantastic with that, breathing techniques, other kinds of embodied things to help them come back into the room and help them start to feel a sense of safety again, or at least move towards a sense of safety. Again, not trying to make this, that can all be very difficult and very complicated and very challenging depending on the level, intensity of trauma. So I'm not trying to make it sound overly easy, but just describing it conceptually. But that's a really key marker, like in terms of if you're wondering, like, am I just re-traumatizing myself? Part of what you want to check in on is like, well, when I'm in the intensity, do I feel any kind of sense of support for myself and from some other being, whether that be God, a fellow human, is there, or do I feel utterly alone? Do I start to feel more terrified? Those kinds of things. The degree to which you're moving towards those, kind of really totally bereft, alone places, cut off, from connection. That's where you want to be concerned. Be suspicious. Like, I might just be rehearsing my trauma, which isn't good. And then, kind of with this is, and this kind of relates to the other two things, right? So instead of an honesty, there's kind of distortions that happen. So because if we're re-traumatizing ourselves, because we're so disconnected, and that's not a criticism, just stating, what's happening, right? Kind of neurologically, psychologically, relationally, spiritually, because we're so disconnected. Part of why, a couple things about distortion. One is that I'm only experiencing then sort of the original trauma, and shades of, aspects of the original trauma. And that's a distortion in the sense that that's not actually telling the truth about the entirety of my experience, right? That's a experience I had, which I need to feel the feelings of, but I need to feel those feelings in the context of my overall life, right? I need to feel those feelings in the context of the present, where I actually do have support. I need to feel those feelings in the context of the fact that I lived through whatever the awful thing was, right? And so there's a way in which sort of there's this distortion effect where it can feel like all that I will ever feel or have ever felt is these awful feelings, right? It's very tunnel vision. It's very, very limited, very constrained. And in that sense, it's a partial truth, right? Because it's like I did experience those awful things, but I can't even actually feel those in an honest way if I'm not able to feel that, like, well, I got through it and I have people with me in the here and now that care about me, right? That's what's going to enable me to have a true sorrow that heals and like sort of lubricates things, right? And makes the emotional muscles limber, right? Like if I'm disconnected from all that, there's these ways in which I'm just further entrenching, like I'm limiting my mobility even more. I'm becoming more stiff and more rigid, where that experience defines me, right? I mean, you've maybe experienced people, or maybe you've at points been the person where an awful thing becomes maybe almost your identity, or it just becomes this defining thing, and it's like And look, awful stuff it can have a huge impact on our life, and it can, alter our lives in so many ways. And yet we are always so much more than even the worst thing. And that's the thing that we see, and that's the thing that, the research shows, is that the people who thrive, it's not that they don't experience terrible, terrible things. It's that they're able to like not let that be the end of their story, right? That's the thing. That's part of where it's a distortion. Is we start to experience the feelings in such a way as if this is the only story that ever was and ever will be, and that's just not true. Like, because I mean, well, shoot, at the minimum, you have other pain about other things that isn't connected to this, and you're not feeling that, so it's a distortion in that regard, right? But it's also like you've experienced good things, you know, even if a tiny way, right? You're still alive, you've continued to live. There's, you know, like it's like, yeah, we can't let this be the only story. It is a part of our story, and it matters, and it deserves being honored and felt and cared for, but it's not. No single story in our life gets to totally define us, because we are way more complex than that. We're way more rich and multivaried and whatnot than that. And so, yeah, we have to, if there's some of these distortions where it's like, this is sort of, it's taking over everything. It's taking up lots of real estate in us. It's like, okay, that's potentially, I'm re-traumatizing myself a bit. And then, you know, yeah, and I kind of also, you know, with embedded in what I was saying there, right, is like how the feelings are funky, right? Like I'm not actually fully feeling all of the feelings, even though there's a sense of like there's like sort of almost too much, if you will, of like the negative feelings there. It's not a full honest feeling, because it's almost exaggerated isn't the right word, but it's this I don't know. I don't have good words here on this one. I just know there's a sense in which it's out of whack, right? It's not that sort of healthy, cleansing, healing, fully feeling of the whole spectrum of things, right, that I was talking about earlier. So maybe I'll have better words for that in the future. But so, yeah, you know, you know, what do I want to say here? There's a sense in which just reliving a trauma, re-traumatizing ourselves, it's a kind of super fast thing that keeps us more stuck, right? So because it part of what's happening is it's too much too fast. Our system is getting flooded. I mean, this is what happens with flashbacks, like with PTSD, is that something triggers and our system goes fully into a past memory, and we don't realize like that I'm not actually on the battlefield, right? And, you know, or I'm not actually in that abusive situation or whatever it is. And we're replaying it and just reliving it and all of the awfulness, you know, or you know, there's degrees here, right? So that's it. It happens super fast, but that by just reliving it, we're rehearsing it. We're just further entrenching it. Again, this leads to what I was saying earlier. The distortion of this becomes the only reality, which isn't true, right? But it can feel very persuasive in the moment. You can feel incredibly persuasive. So. Yeah, so whereas we're talking about like, you know, healthy grief is a movement, there's a measuredness to it. Healthy grief isn't too fast. It's not too fast. It's not too slow. It's just right isn't quite the right phrase, because it's not about getting it perfect, but it's this healthy middle, right? But we're actually moving forward. We're not just entrenching and getting more stuck. So the other kind of false grief I want to talk about, and this one, both of these, you know, are kind of, say, near and dear to my heart, because both of my own experience and then just my care for others. But this one, I think very much I learned through my own inner work. And so this is whining or self-pity, complaining, right? Like these are all variations of the same thing, or, you know, kind of different levels of intensity of the same thing. And look, you know, it can sound like I'm being mean. I'm not, you know, in terms of using this word, you know, saying that we whine, you know, that some of us whine. But I realized through some of my own counseling as a client is that there were these places where I kept, in some ways this has some similarities with the re-traumatizing, except for that it's like, it's not a re-traumatizing that's going on, but it does have a similar rehearsing quality, right? Like I would keep circling around something and I would whine about it and I'd complain about it. I'd have even a lot of emotion. I might even cry some, but I wasn't actually entering fully into the pain in a way that was healing, right? Like it's a very interesting quality. So whining, similar to the retraumatizing thing, there's a disconnect happening. There's a lack of connection. With whining, though, on an unconscious level, there's actually a blocking of connection. Like, this is part of what's really interesting. So the retraumatizing dynamic is more of a passive experience, right? Like, we're flooded, and this experience takes us in this horrible place, horrible way. Whereas whining is much more active, even if we're not conscious of it. There's a way in which we get a sense of power, a sense of control, not real power or not real control, but there's the illusion, right? Through this experience of whining, by my complaining about it, by my whining about it yet again, can you believe that they and I'm never gonna forgive them, whatever, it's like, you're gonna know what your your favorite phrases are, but we're holding on to some wound and some pain, but not actually healing it. And so I kind of think of this, it's like enshrining it, right? But like behind glass. I'm not actually going to go in there and hug and hold that wounded part of me. I'm just going to like put it there like an exhibit and be like, hey, look at that. Look, this is, everybody remember, this is what happened to me and how terrible they treated me and right? Like, there's usually a lot of anger with it, right? This might be something that's going on a lot in our culture. But it's not an anger that moves through into sorrow, right? It's an anger. It's an anger in some ways that is unconsciously demanding that somehow I should be able to make that thing not true. This is where where it's not honest, right? Like, there's a dishonesty, there's a resisting of the truth that the awful thing did happen to me. The awful thing did happen to you, right? And we can't change it. We cannot go back in time and change it. We can change our experience of it. We can actually go and be with those hurting parts of us. We can open that glass door and go into that display case, and we can actually be with the pain. We can actually allow connection to come with us, right? And allow ourselves to feel the sorrow. So, but there's a number of things that can be going on here, and this potentially could almost be its own video, maybe. But because this is a thing I've realized that we humans are really good at. Like, we love to whine. We love to avoid grief in this way. Like, we kind of keep it enshrined, and we block connection. We say, oh, it's okay, it's not that big of a deal, or whatever, or somebody tries to really comfort us, and we just move towards the anger. I just want to be angry about them. I don't want to be sad about it, right? We're by blocking the sadness, we're blocking the medicine. We're blocking what would actually help us heal, because kind of deep down we don't want to heal. And so there's several potential reasons. I'm going to just touch on a few. One of the reasons we might block connection and do this whining thing is that maybe we feel like we don't deserve. Maybe there's maybe part of what's twisted around in here is some shame stuff, right? Or maybe kind of the opposite of that is, well, if I actually let the connection in, that's going to stir up, and not that we're conscious of this, but it's going to stir up in us. It's going to stir up in me that how much I wanted and needed that originally in the original wound, and I didn't have it. And that's going to take me into the pain, and I don't want to go into the pain. And I don't want to go into the pain. This is, kind of other aspects here of, because I don't want the original thing to be true. I don't want it to be true. And so like a child, I don't mean that in a mean way, just a descriptive way, but like a child, I'm holding out a fantasy. I'm demanding, I'm throwing a temper tantrum in my whining, trying to coerce the world, coerce the universe, coerce people around me, coerce God, all of the above, into somehow making it not true. And so, of course, that's going to keep me stuck forever, right? And some people spend their whole life doing this, where they never actually allow themselves to heal. They never actually allow comfort in, allow connection in, allow themselves to be held, and allow themselves to honestly admit, this is what happened, and just let the floodgates open, right? Yeah. So I had to come to terms with that. Part of me really likes to whine. I would climb down into what I called my well of misery. And I would complain and I would whine and I would get angry as I was digging the hole deeper. And I'd be like, and why is it so dank and dark and deep down here? And dig, dig, dig. And it was only when I started to admit to myself that a part of me didn't want to get well. And why I didn't want to get well, because if I allowed myself to get well, this is another aspect, another kind of dynamic. If I allow myself to get well, then it felt like, well, then they get away with it. You know, the people that hurt me. You know, there's no consequences for them, right? They'll never know. They'll never understand. But part of what I had to get honest with myself about, in terms of this particular example, is that they weren't going to understand in either way. Then my trying to make them understand wasn't working. And no amount of my putting off my grief, ignoring my grief, was going to make them get it. Not to the degree or way that I wanted and needed. And so I had to face that, like, they didn't get it. They weren't going to get it. They're not going to get it, as far as I could tell. I had to let go of that. And it may not be fair. It may not be just. But it's what is. It's what was. And it's only as I got honest about that and let myself have my feelings about that things started to thaw. The ice started to break, right? I started to be able to, like, move into the underlying grief. That's actually part of what, gave me access to, like that, whatever, couple of years ago, that example from earlier, that deeper layer of sorrow about something, is because I was doing this kind of work. I was getting more and more honest. I was letting go of my kind of unconscious demands, that, my healing had to look a certain way. And it's like, I can't control other people. We don't have that power. Like, I mean, I'm a therapist, right? And sometimes people are like, can't you just da-da-da? And I'm like, it's not how it works. Like, I can only help somebody do what they have some desire to do, right? I can't actually make anything happen. Like, yeah, we love our fantasies about that, but that's not real life. So, in a lot of ways, I've kind of been along the way here been talking about how, as I'm talking about false grief, there's been bits and pieces here of, like, what do we watch for, and how do we try to move out of that into healthy grief? And look, there's so much that could be said here, and grief is messy. There's not true stages of grief. It doesn't follow a particular pattern exactly, right? Like, it's, I mean, I had, as I shared in another video recently, like, I had some sorrow come up from that was over a decade old, like, that I didn't know was there, like, it just, grief goes how it goes, right? Like, so what we want to be doing is we want to be attending to how connected am I, right? How much am I staying connected to connection, to support, to love, right? How honest am I being, right? Am I feeling my feelings, the good and the bad, right? The positive and the negative, the pleasant and the unpleasant. We want to, just really be attending to all of that. If we are re-traumatizing ourselves, if we suspect that's what's going on, we really need somebody, in terms of connection, we need somebody who has immense capacity, right? They've done a lot of intense work, right? So they're not going to be afraid of what's coming up in us or flooded by it, nor are they going to mistake it for true grief, right? And also that probably means they've got a fair bit of skill. So this probably is a counselor or somebody like a counselor, right? Because we're also going to need, if there's that kind of intensity going on, we need it to be a relationship where explicitly the two of us are agreeing that, hey, this is what we're doing. You're going to help me. You're going to walk with me. And they're like, yes, I'm going to do that. And so typically that's something like a counseling kind of relationship. For whining, you can start working on that, wherever you're at, right? Like, because that's, though there can be underlying stuff that, may require, more kind of intense relational context, like counseling, things in that vein. if you're recognizing that you whine, start to talk about that. Share that with your friends. Be like, I watched this video and shit, I was realizing like I think I whine a bit. I think I'm not actually grieving. And like practice that honesty piece and practice that connection piece by that's inviting people into a little bit more vulnerability with you, a little bit more realness, right? And then start to ask yourself, where is it you're afraid to go deeper? Like, what are you avoiding? Because if you're whining, you're circling, right? Because you don't want to actually go further into something, and let yourself start to wonder about what is that? What am I afraid to feel, and why? So there is, again, so much here. This is a topic that I don't know that we could ever finish talking about. If this has stirred up some things in you in terms of where you have some particular questions, right? You have maybe some examples. I would love to hear those. You can send those to me anonymously at asksean.org. Either you can type it or you can do an audio recording. More specific examples can have a way of drawing out more nuance in all of this, right? I try to make this as real world applicable as possible, but there's also an element of like we're describing principles and, kind of doing an overview of things. And sometimes that can, feel a little disconnected from real life, which is not how I want it to be, but it just can be sort of the nature of the beast. So yeah, having real examples, real stories, has a way of sort of then further bringing us down into the particular, into the nitty gritty, where we all live. And so, yeah, I would absolutely love to hear those from you. And yeah, try to be able to offer some help here asynchronously through YouTube. But yeah, whatever is coming up for you, these places of pain are entrusted to us, to love them, to help them heal, to help them not be stuck in the past, stuck in the prisons sometimes that we have constructed for them. We want to let them out and help them be free, but it does require wisdom, and it does require help, in some kind of way. Particularly the more intense something is, we need help moving really, really slowly, right? Thinking about those places where we're re-traumatizing ourselves. We need someone who can help us really move at micro moments or whatever, so that we can actually stay with something and stay connected and metabolize it and actually have it be fruitful, right? Because again, that's the goal here. This isn't about like, we're not trying to punish ourselves or something, right? Like, this isn't about being miserable. It's about actually cleansing things, right? It's about, cleaning out the wound, right? With antiseptic, and so again, healthy grief is the medicine. It's what helps cleanse, these places, so that we can actually move freely. So yeah, it's like, that requires skill and gentleness and wisdom and courage and perseverance. So much freaking perseverance, because it's not quick. And you never know if you're actually done. Like I said, I had stuff come up from a decade ago that's like, oh, okay, there's more there. Didn't know that. But we can learn to be hospitable. We can learn to say, oh, okay, this is here. This is important. This is important because I matter. And so these parts of me matter. And like, I want to help this heal. I want to help this grow and heal. So you're worth the effort. You really are. Each of us is. Well, until next time, peace be with you.